I think Justin is lined up for us next.
Yep.
So hopefully while Justin shares his slides, we can thank Andrew one more time. Really great talk, really interesting.
Thank you.
And personally, thank you for setting up Prolific. I use it all the time and I find it incredibly helpful.
Great
So,
to hear. Great to hear. All right.
okay. So
Thank you.
Justin looks like he's ready. He's going to be talking to us a little bit about Sona systems. Thank you very much, Justin.
Okay, thanks. Hello, good morning from just outside Washington, D.C. So if Trump hears the results of the survey we just did and the hospital where he would end up if he has a sudden heart attack or something, he's about a mile or two from where I'm sitting right now. So if we hear a helicopter, we'll know what happened with that survey, but who knows. Anyway, thanks for having me. We're going to talk generally about the benefits and drawbacks of running your own participant pool. It doesn't have to be our software. You could use any other method. You could use a Google Doc. There's a lot of different ways to do this. Just wanted to talk about the general concepts and why it may or may not work for you. Not really going to do sales pitch. No one wants to hear that. And probably more than half the people watching this are already using our software anyway. So make sure it's going to flip over here. There we go. All right. So typically, you wouldn't run your own participant pool if you're just one researcher on your own. Normally what we see is it would be entire departments or labs, particularly larger labs, or within companies, it might be the user research section or things like that. So if you're an individual researcher, your better option if you want to explore this path would be to look within your department or lab and see if they have anything that they offer already, and then place your study within that pool that they're using and make use of their pool. In terms of what is your own participant pool, it's essentially you've developed the pool. So instead of going to a service or a panel which is providing participants, you're getting your own participants. A common scenario is they might be provided by the university. So it could be typically students who are completing studies as part of a course or for course credit. It can also be people doing studies where they get paid. It could be the community in general. It could be maybe people local. So there are people in the university or in the local area, or it could be anyone all around. And we see all types of those situations when it comes to using our software. In terms of why to run your own pool, one is local. So maybe you're looking at the local council has some kind of issue and you're doing research on a recent change or something that's specific to a certain region. Then you might want to target just that group. And sometimes you'll find that it's difficult to find that group unless you recruit them on your own. So we had a customer that was looking at just people in a certain town in Italy. So you may not find in a more generalized panel provider, you may just not find enough people who meet that criteria if it's a very specific need. You also might have a specific demographic, which is a little bit harder to find. Maybe you're recruiting with people in a nursing home, or we have some customers who use ours for canine research. So they have the dog owners, since dogs aren't very good at typing yet, they have the dog owners who enter the participant pool on behalf of their dogs. And then those dogs will be called in, or also with research with children, you might have the parents doing it that way. So there's a couple, those are some benefits there, and in terms of your target community. The other thing there is with it being your pool, and this is sort of key, you can track the participant over time. What this allows you to do is, let's say you have a participant who you sent them one study, and then you want to follow up with only those participants who participated in your previous study. You can create your study to be only open to those participants if you want a follow-up study. Or the other way around, you can have a disqualifier. You could say, anyone who's done these 3 previous studies, I don't want them to participate in my new study. So you can set up studies that way, and you can do it with any studies in the pool. So maybe you have another researcher in your lab or your department who's doing a study with a similar concept, and you want to prevent anyone who did their study from doing yours because maybe there's some kind of deception involved, or some kind of study design where if they're aware of it from the previous study, it would affect the data with your study. So you have that option as well, and you can as well set up some other restrictions. In terms of pre-screening, I think it was talked about in the previous talk. So with our pool, you actually set up your pre-screen questions, and then anyone who joins the pool will be presented with those questions at the time they join the pool. So if your pool is focused on a certain area, you'll probably only ask questions to determine demographics of only those particular items you're interested in. So if you're running a pool with dogs, you might be asking a lot of details about the dog breed and some other details there, which you may not see in a more generalized pool. So you can choose exactly what questions you'll be asking when you set up your pool, and then you can set up studies so that they're restricted based on that. You can set up the study. Our system will tell you how many people qualify. You can email them to invite them to your study. So it allows you to really market your study specific to the pool you've created. On top of that, for example, with our system, you can have automatic emails go out. So let's say once a week, they get an email. All right, here's a list of all the studies we're running in our entire department, which you qualify for, and here's how you can sign up for them. Other reasons with some, and not all, but some panel products, or when you're purchasing a sample, you're limited to using their product to collect data. And so maybe their survey tool is not ideal for your purposes. Maybe it just lacks certain things you need. So our product integrates directly with more than 15 different online survey products and experiment builders, including many that were mentioned today, like PsychoPy, like Gorilla. The other thing you get, which is pretty difficult with an online panel providers, is lab studies. So maybe you run research where you want people to come in, and there's a benefit there with the participant pool. You can, at least with our system, you can set up, all right, this is an online study. This one's a lab study. I'll be running it on these days at these times, and people just log in and sign up for a time that's suitable for them, and they're given a reminder about when they need to show up and so on. So you have the flexibility there to run both lab studies and online studies, and this can be helpful when some studies, it's just very difficult to run online. Maybe you need to put them into do an MRI scan. There's a lot of different types of research where it's just very difficult to do that research online. I realize the topic of this conference is online research, but there are some studies where sometimes it just works better. And to have that flexibility gives you the flexibility later as well. You can have a participant do an online study first, later they do a lab study, whatever it happens to be. And then another thing is cost. So if your department is already using a service like ours, then maybe they don't charge you at all to use it. And you can just post your study on there and you get your participants for free. Or if not, it can be your cost. In our case, we charge not by how many participants are on the system. We only charge by when they actually participate in a study. And you can buy packages of this. So some customers we have built very large pools, 20,000 plus in their pool, and then they just not everyone participates. So it's fine to have a large pool. So cost can often be an issue, and so this can help to deal with that. But why would you not want to run your own pool? One is, and we get contacted by this now and then. If you're just one researcher, you're running a one-off study, you're not going to have follow-ups, you don't have very many requirements, there's no need for a full running your own pool. There's just too much investment it would need to take to set up that pool, to get things going. It's just not worth it for one study. Just find another service where you can just distribute that link out, you'll get your results. Much easier way to handle things. The other is, if you're going to be building your own pool, maybe you have a very specific demographic, it's going to take time to build that. You're going to be out marketing it. You might be going out into the general public or doing targeted online advertising like Facebook ads towards a certain group that you're focused on, it's going to take time to build that pool. So you're not going to get immediate results if you don't already have your pool. And then also, if you don't have any particular requirements, if just a general population, considering the previous points here, you may be fine with just with not needing to run your own pool. So that's the general points. One thing I wanted to focus on, it's not often spoken about, and it has nothing to do with our software, but just I've seen many studies lately where they talk about different tools you can use for running your online experiments and all this. What a lot of them leave out, and I just want to point this out because people sometimes forget about this, and this is important. Your ethics board is or should be asking about this, and you want to have answers for these. And there's a lot of compliance when you do things online. So one is the data privacy side. Of course, we have GDPR. So whatever tool you're using, do you have a GDPR, do you have a DPA with your provider, a data processing addendum with them? If you're in recruiting for people in the US, if the people are in California, are they complying with the California Consumer Privacy Act? If you're in the EU and you're collecting data from people in the US, is your solution Privacy Shield compliant? So some things to consider there with data privacy. How do you handle if a participant were to contact you with right to be forgotten and say, I want my data deleted? Do you have a procedure for that? Make sure that you have all that covered in case your ethics board asks about it. There are big fines too with things like GDPR for non-compliance. So it's best to be compliant and make sure your solution is compliant. Another is accessibility. So what this means is for people who might be using a screen reader, maybe they're visually impaired, or they have mobility, they have trouble using a mouse, for example. Is what you're doing compliant with various requirements like WCAG Section 508 that allows them to participate in your study? It may not, maybe you've decided to exclude them. Maybe your ethics board is fine saying, I'm fine if you exclude people with mobility issues or things like that. If that's fine, maybe you don't need to consider it, but if you do, then make sure that whatever you're doing is compliant. We see very often things where buttons are not labeled or images are not labeled and things like that, where certain users do need that to be able to use software. And the other part is computer security. We get these, we actually got one about an hour ago, but people ask about this quite frequently. How is the data being stored? Is it being stored in an encrypted format? Are vulnerability scans being performed on the servers that are hosting this data? How are you storing the data? What's the procedure if you have a data breach? Does the company you're storing it with, do they have data breach procedures? Do they have insurance for that? Just some things to consider there. And then finally, the data storage. Now and then we get tearful phone calls from researchers who forgot to back up their data. And is your provider backing it up? What happens? They say, we're in a data center, great. What happens if that data center gets hit by an earthquake or an airplane crashes into it? Is that data also backed up somewhere in another city? Just something to consider there. So that's a general idea. I don't want to take up too much time. Just very briefly about us. We've been around for almost 20 years. We're used by 1,400 universities in 35 countries, run over 500,000 studies, 17 million participants. A lot of you use our software, so I'm just going to mention what's coming really soon. Multi-part online studies, and you can use different products for each part. Contact tracing, it's not in the system, but it's already available. So for lab studies, click on any name and see everyone who came into contact with that person for future compliance. Capacity reporting to show how many people are in a lab at any given hour of the day, because there will be limits placed on that at a lot of universities. And support for using Zoom for studies. You can do it now, but we'll make it more integrated. So that's all I had. I know we have another great speaker coming up. I'll make sure to be around at the end of this session for any questions. And there's our contact information. So thank you for having me.
All right, fantastic. Thanks, Justin. We are one of those 1,400 departments using Sona systems, and it is just so valuable as a tool. I love it. It's been great for us. I got to say, I was wondering where you were going to go with the canine research. That hadn't specifically crossed my mind.
Right.
Is that a big subfield for you guys? I mean, are there a lot of people doing dog studies?
It's not It's not big. I just want to make sure I stop sharing. Yeah. Okay. It's not that big. It's a. We were surprised, but I guess word gets around that if you're running a canine cognition lab, get in touch with us. So we do see a little bit of that, but by and large, 99.5% of our participants are humans. That's for sure.
Okay, that sort of is reassuring, and I feel a little bit better about that. I was thinking, man, I've missed out a whole field of cognition. Um, but I think what I'll do is I'll save more questions for the little panel bit at the end of Sandy's presentation. But I just like to say thanks again to Justin Fidler.
Thank you.